All right, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's episode of Teen Talk Live. I am so excited to be here with you. It's been a while since we have been live, and so this feels really great to be here. Welcome, Marquita. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And tonight we have a really interesting topic for you. And we're going to be talking about teen dating violence awareness. And you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. So please share this out. Just gonna type the title right here. Um, Teen dating violence awareness. And I have the expert here with us. And in just a minute, she is going to introduce herself. But I want you to share this video out because we're going to be sharing really critical information about teen dating violence and talking about signs, talking about what to do, how to intervene so you're not putting your teen in greater danger if this happens to be the case with your teenager. So welcome to tonight's episode. And my name is Dillard. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and your host for Teen Talk Live. And I ask you to help me welcome our guest expert tonight, Miss Vanessa Wilkins. Vanessa, welcome to Teen Talk Live.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so glad that you were able to join us. I remember the first time I met you, we were at a training together. And when you introduced yourself and started talking about the different programs that you ran, I thought, oh my goodness, she will be so perfect for Teen Talk Live because this is such critical information that you share. And so welcome. Would you please tell our audience a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks. It's an honor to be on your show. So thank you for inviting me here. My name is Vanessa Wilkins, and I'm the executive director for Promise Place, which is legally the Fayette County Council on Domestic Violence. We are a nonprofit domestic violence shelter program, and we cover 4 counties in our service area, which are Fayette, Spalding, Pike, and Upson. I've been with the agency for a little over 15 years now, so I've seen some changes made both in services that we're able to provide to survivors of abuse, as well as changes for the good in our legislation that allow us to do more to help these survivors.
Oh my goodness. So the name of the agency is Promise Place?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And what age range do you serve, or is there a certain population that you serve at Promise Place?
We serve anyone who is a victim of domestic violence. We like to term them as survivors because once they get to us, they've already been through some form of abuse, whether it's physical, verbal, the different types I'm sure we'll go into later.
Yes.
But we serve all ages. We have children, we have women that come into our shelter with children. Some of the things that we provide are a shelter. We have a 24-hour crisis hotline. Mm-hmm. We have support groups, counseling. We do a lot of court advocacy with clients to make sure they get protective orders to keep their abusers away from them. And we do a lot of education in the community, especially in the schools, where we talk to middle and high school students about healthy relationships.
Oh my goodness. And that part really struck me because I do a healthy relationships class workshop in the shelters through the Alma G. Davis Foundation. And that is such a critical topic to talk about because, if you've never seen what healthy looks like, you grow up and emulate what you've had, and oftentimes it has not been healthy.
That's right.
Right. So I'm just changing my title because I put teen dating violence, but it's really teen domestic violence awareness. And so when we talk about domestic violence awareness, a lot of times our minds automatically go to like intimate partner violence, but that's not necessarily the case, right?
With teen
Yes.
content, a lot of times it is not an intimate partner, but some type of relationship,
Hmm.
some type of dating relationship, particularly in teens. Though, of course, sexual abuse can be a part of the controlling factors within that type of relationship.
Excellent. So could you tell us, give us an idea, give the audience an idea of different types of domestic violence. When we're looking at the domestic violence, what are some of the areas, because you just alluded to some, what are some of the areas that contributes to domestic violence?
Okay. Well, first of all, domestic violence by definition is a pattern of controlling behavior that's usually exerted over one person within the context of a relationship. Within the teen relationship, it may not be an intimate partner relationship as it may be with an adult situation, but some type of dating relationship as well. So there are many forms of abuse. A lot of times we think of domestic violence as black eyes or broken, arms or bruises, but that's just a little tip of the iceberg when it comes to domestic violence. There's so many more different types of abuse, many different layers. The bottom determining factor is the power and control. And there are many ways to do that. Physical, of course, is one way. Then there's the emotional abuse, there is psychological abuse, and then there's also sexual abuse.
Yes, yes. And I was when I was doing research about the different types of abuse, and let me just pause to say, hey, you all, welcome to Teen Talk Live. I see Marquita is here, Krista's here, Ginger, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and please feel free to share this out and send your questions in. And if you're catching us on the replay, also let me know that you are watching and share this out. So when we're looking at different types of domestic violence and domestic abuse, like you said, it's not just limited to physical.
No.
There's so many different, it runs the whole gamut. So we
Yeah.
have emotional, um, when I was doing the research, I saw also, I researched about immigration abuse,
Yeah.
and I want to talk about that a little bit. Spiritual abuse, even academic abuse, then cyber abuse, like electronic abuse,
Mhm.
and so many different forms of abuse that I was like, oh my goodness, yes, it's basically any area where someone can exert power and control over you.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
And
so
emotional abuse can be the most damaging a lot of times. Physical abuse, I'm not downplaying that at all,
right.
but in time, bruises and broken bones, they heal. But
Mhm,
words, they do a lot of damage, to us, and especially as women.
mhm.
And that takes even longer to heal from. Once you hear someone telling you over and over again, you're ugly, you're not worth anything, no one will ever want you.
Yes.
Once you keep hearing those things over and over again, it starts becoming a part of you.
Yes.
And that takes years and years to heal from sometimes.
Yes. When I was growing up, we used to say this phrase, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words,
Mhm.
they never hurt me.
Yeah,
How false is that?
exactly.
Right.
Words are hurtful.
Yes. And they at least, and again, I'm not minimizing any form of abuse, but at least when we have physical abuse, there's no doubt about it. You can tell, right, exactly what's going on. Whether you choose to stay in it or not, there's no doubt about it. But when we're talking about emotional abuse, psychological abuse, a lot of times the victim of the abuse really internalize that, and you tell me if I'm correct, because this is what I'm seeing. The victim will internalize it and say, well, they didn't really mean that, or maybe I deserve that, or I didn't really hear that. You kind of you have room to talk yourself out of it.
We see that a lot, especially there's a lot of mind games being played, making her think, and I say her because the majority of the clients we see are female, but this also happens to males. But making her think that she's crazy. I didn't really say that. You're blowing things out of proportion. If you tell any of your friends or anybody outside of this house, they'll never believe you. Humiliation, we see a lot of that as well. And just making her think that she's crazy.
Yes, yes. And it's so easy to do, especially if you're somebody of prominence or somebody who is well respected in your community. It's easy to say, and for the victim to believe that, oh, nobody will believe you.
Exactly. What does an abuser look like?
That's a good point.
An abuser looks just like anybody that you see walking down the street, anybody that might be sitting next to you in your place of worship, anybody you might be shopping with at the grocery store or working alongside of at the office.
That is so true. That is so true. It's not some scary person in a mask somewhere.
No.
Right? And so when we are talking, and again, we say women because the larger population who's being abused are women. And so, but let's not diminish the fact that there are men who are suffering domestic abuse and extreme domestic abuse, right?
Yes.
So when we see that, and when you have women who finally get the strength to come to you, what are some of the things that you are seeing? And let me give an example of what I'm asking. I know that in therapy, when a woman finally reach out for therapy and try to seek help, I've seen somebody who's been beaten down, somebody who has low to no self-esteem, and somebody who's living in isolation. So tell me about that. What are some of those things that you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely we see all of those things. Isolation is definitely one of the most prominent forms of power and control that we see being used. Telling her that she can't go out with her friends, keeping her away from her families. Most of the time, especially the women that come to us in the shelter, they have been moved entire states away from their families and any of their support system. So that abuser just has ultimate control over them, and they have no other options. So we do see that a lot.
And she believes it.
Yes. We also see a lot of tracking of our clients. We've had in the past, we've had clients that we've had to meet within the community because he looks at their odometer every time he comes home. He knows exactly how long it takes to get from the house to the grocery store or the bank and back. And any deviation from that, she's in trouble. So we've had to find really creative ways of meeting with our clients.
Oh, wow. And that tracking, would you consider that also a part of the technology abuse?
Yes, and we would also consider it as stalking.
Okay.
Placing someone under surveillance.
Okay. Okay. And so when we talk about technology abuse or electronic abuse, what are some of the other signs? I know that the continuous calling and texting and things like that, along with the tracking that you just described, what are some of the other signs that we can look for?
Knowing her passwords, always checking her phone. If the phone is ringing, someone that's always having to answer the phone, it can't go to voicemail. They have to answer it when it rings. Because he's checking up on them. We've seen devices placed on the bottom of vehicles, so anytime someone's coming into our shelter, we have them get their car checked, for tracking devices. And you'd be surprised at the number of cars that have had it, and the clients had no knowledge that it was even there. There's apps on their phones to track their whereabouts. Technology has been so far advanced, it's just really difficult keeping up with it in our quest to keep clients safe.
Yeah. And so for a teenager, let's say a teenage girl who is going through a domestic abuse, especially with a intimate partner or some kind of, not necessarily, some kind of a relationship. So that might look similar, right?
Yeah, it's the for teens, it's the same power and control dynamics as it is for adults. But they have even more barriers to being able to escape an abusive situation. For example, they may go to school together. You can't get away from someone if you're attending the same school and you're in the same class. They may have the same group of friends. So, trying to get away from him may mean being isolated from her friends or their group of peers.
Yeah.
Also, there's a fear that they won't believe her because usually um, these abusers, they're charming, they're friendly, they're outgoing, everybody loves them, very charismatic. And so no one would believe, that this is going on in the relationship.
Right. Like you said, teenagers have that added barrier or added barriers, and, oh, anybody would be happy to date him or her. And you just make
Mhm.
a big deal out of it.
Yeah,
Or, if you don't want to be with me, I can find anybody to be with me, kind of
yeah.
thing.
Or they can tear down their reputation at school and make up all these things about them, and spread it across the school.
And across social media, which
Yeah.
is so devastating.
Yes. Mhm.
Yes, yes, and I've seen that a lot with some of my teens, where they just get totally violated on in social media, and that stage of their life, having social connections is so important.
Yes. Oh
In
yeah.
these, yeah, and these situations often lead to depression, suicide ideations, and things like that.
Yeah. They become more withdrawn as well. You might see signs that they're not acting like themselves. They may even be dressing differently, dressing the way that he wants them to dress, not doing their hobbies anymore. If they, for example, if they played an instrument, now they're not wanting to do that anymore. They're wanting to just be with this one person all the time. Those are a few red flags.
Yeah, yeah. And when I'm talking about teenagers, I'm extending this to young adults, and in those in college as well,
Yeah.
because a lot of times you're the social issue, the social your social life isn't fully developed, and so um, there could be some uh, isolation, lots of isolation, even within a college campus as well.
Well, definitely. A lot of times when we refer to teen dating violence, we use the group ages 13 through 24.
Yes, yes, I think that's a really good point that I should have made in the beginning. 13 to 24,
Mhm,
and that's pretty standard across
mhm.
the board when we're talking about teen dating violence, which goes into young adults
Yeah.
as
And yeah, and this is also a demographic. Georgia puts out a fatality review report every year for all the domestic violence fatalities. And when they were doing their research of all the people that were unfortunately killed as a result of domestic violence, they found out that the majority of them were between the ages of 13 and 24 when they first began dating their abuser who eventually killed them.
My goodness. I just did a mother-daughter telesummit, and I had a guest on who started dating her boyfriend very young, at a very young age in middle school. They ended up getting married, and then when they split, it was so horrific that he came back and he ended up killing both her parents, and left her for dead, and did all of this in front of their children.
Wow.
It was just horrific. It was all over the news. It made national news. And so that is a great point, because usually the more violent, from what I understand, the relationship is, that chances are they started dating earlier in life.
Yeah, I don't have the research about that, but we do know that the most dangerous time for anyone in an abusive relationship is when they do take the steps to leave. And
Yeah.
so it sounds like in that situation, she took the steps to leave, and that's when things people are at a higher risk for being a fatality.
Yes, yes. She took the steps to leave. She got the restraining order. She did everything that she she felt she should have done, but his behavior kept escalating and she didn't necessarily realize that it would have gotten to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the statistics that I read is that roughly 1.5 million high school boys and girls in the US admit to being intentionally hit or physically harmed in the last year by someone they're romantically involved with.
Mhm.
That is significantly high in my perspective.
It is, definitely. It's
Is
a statistic we've seen, stay pretty much the same over the years.
Yeah. Is there a particular demographic within the age group of 13 to 24 that has a higher rate of domestic abuse? Um, and the reason why I ask that is I know I've learned that the LGBTQ community also has a high number of domestic violence, and it's less reported
Oh, definitely.
because of the stigma that goes along with that.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know that there's a particular demographic, definitely once they've left their homes and they're in college, that number increases, that risk increases because, they can physically leave that person that they're in a relationship with. And it's oftentimes a more serious relationship, but it does happen to teens as well where they can be at risk of homicide.
Wow. That's important for everyone who's watching, who's any kind of youth workers or pastors, counselors, anybody who works with youth to really know and pay attention to. So one of the statistics again that I found is like teens who suffer dating abuse are subject to long-term consequences like alcoholism, eating disorder, promiscuity, um, suicidal ideation, and violent behaviors. What do you see in your work?
As far as the teens,
Yes, and the long-term consequences that they develop as a result of this.
well, our organization is more of a crisis
Mhm.
program. So the people that we serve, typically they're going through their situation right then. And so we haven't been able to follow them, years into the future to see what the long-term consequences are.
Right.
But yes, without counseling or adequate support, we do see people suffering, and we see this in adults too, same dynamics, suffering from depression. We've even seen a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder
Yes.
because it is trauma that they're going through. We have seen eating disorders, withdrawing from family, friends, through their depression, and then not able to trust and move on to have healthy relationships again.
Yeah. Yes. And I think we also, I feel like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, when we're talking about domestic violence or domestic abuse for teens, we also are including parent abuse. So not just for a person they're romantically involved with, but also abuse that they might sustain in their homes as well.
Yes, that would be domestic violence because one of the categories of domestic violence can be parents, against children or the children against their parents. We see that happen a lot, especially with the older generation. They're afraid of their children and their children are abusing them. So we do see that dynamic within domestic violence. When we're talking about teen dating violence, however, we usually talk about it in the context of a relationship.
Yes, yes. And like you said, in the older population, I serve a population where a lot of grandparents are taking care of their grandkids and
Mhm.
great grandparents. And that's some of the things that I've noticed and I've been careful to ask questions about as well, because there are signs sometimes that I see of abuse
Yes.
from that teen towards the older adult.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah.
sometimes they're very afraid to share that that's what's going on.
Mhm. And they're embarrassed, to admit that that's a family member. They care about their family member.
Hmm. And they care about what might happen to them. If I tell, they might get they might get arrested, or they might have to go to some kind of program, and just thinking about the long-term consequences that the teen might have versus their health.
Oh, definitely we see that. So, but usually by the time it's reported to us, it's pretty involved and pretty extreme because they've tried different methods of coping with it,
Mhm.
given chances, and tried to handle it on their own until they're at the point where it's beyond their control.
Yes, yes. So, what do we say to parents who might be watching and they, have an inclination that their teen might be in a abusive romantic relationship, and it doesn't even have to be romantic.
Mhm.
Again, might be in a relationship with someone, because friendships can
Including
also
friendship.
be abusive.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we take time to look at that, but any situation where there's an exertion of power on and control over you, somebody subjecting you to do something that you don't want to do, right?
Mhm.
It's abusive.
Mhm.
So what can we say to parents who might see this in their teenager and their friendship or their romantic relationship?
I would say, know the warning signs. We mentioned it a little bit earlier, the isolation, the not being themselves, the way they used to be, changing the way they look, changing their habits, their hobbies, really being, teenagers are on their phones all the time anyway, but always needing to respond to text messages or um, anything else. Oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Sorry.
I can hear you too. Are you still there? Okay, I think we're frozen. Can you can you hear me? Okay, I think we're having some technical difficulties, but Tasha, thank you so much for joining. And yes, these are some really important signs to look for. I think we lost Miss Vanessa. Hopefully, if she can hear me, she can go out and come back in. But Tasha says long term for me cause suicidal attempts, anxiety, low self esteem, and isolation. And like Miss Vanessa was saying, isolation is one of those key components of um, dating or domestic violence. Isolation, so that nobody else will see what's going on, nobody will ask questions and things like that. So let me go over here and try to get Miss Vanessa back on the panel with our technical difficulties. Are you back? Okay, let me unmute you. So
I don't know what happened. I'm sorry.
back.
Let's see. Oh, there you are.
Yes, welcome back.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I just, took the time to look at some of our comments, and
Okay.
I'm looking at Vanessa, and I don't know why I have that line across my forehead either. But Vanessa was saying, yes, that was me. I feared what would happen to my parents and siblings versus my abuser. So she is talking about her own experiences, and thank you for being transparent. Um, and so fear plays a big factor in continuing to perpetuate this abuse cycle.
Yeah. And one other thing, so going back to before we got disconnected,
Yeah.
some of the things that as a parent you want to talk to your teen about what is a healthy relationship. What does that look like? And I know a lot of us have not grown up in homes where there's been healthy relationships to pattern ourselves after, myself included. And so, educate yourself so that you can educate your children, so that you can say, okay, starting with you, you're going to end up being in a healthy relationship and not follow the same pattern as before that you may have gone through. I was raised in what I thought was a healthy environment, but it was not until I grew up and I realized how dysfunctional it was. So I did not have any healthy relationships to pattern, my idea of what that looks like. And so, but now that I've been educated on it, I'm able to pass that on to my children on, what should be a red flag in a relationship, what you should tolerate in a relationship, what is healthy, and what you should run from.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times too, the media, they normalize, abusive behavior, in the music that we listen to, the messages that we see. One of the biggest things that we see is that teenagers think jealousy is the same as love.
Wow.
So if someone's jealous of them, oh, you're talking to someone else, oh, they must really love me.
Yes.
And so if someone's jealous, they see that as something that they want to attain,
Yes.
because it means they're desirable.
Yes.
And so we see that a lot with teenagers, and we have to, educate them that no, jealousy has nothing to do with love. And so that's really one of the biggest things that we encounter with teenagers today.
That is so key. That is so key. And I think when we talk to our teens, you start talking earlier before they become teenagers, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That's so important. And I think that we need to talk to our boys and we need to talk to our girls as
Mhm.
well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Mhm.
When we do our teen dating violence prevention program, we do both boys and girls because, again, boys can be victims of domestic violence. And if not, they may witness domestic violence in the home and think that's the way a male is supposed to control a female. And
Absolutely.
so we want to erase those patterns now.
That's so true. And a lot of what we've learned about about healthy relationships or about relationships is not healthy. And so there is a process of unlearning that has to be done.
Yes,
And so
definitely.
we can relearn good patterns, good boundaries. What are some of the signs of a healthy relationship? Somebody you can get along with, somebody who shares your interests, somebody's not putting you down.
Mhm.
What would be some of the other components that you would say of a healthy relationship?
Of a healthy relationship, someone respecting your opinion
Yeah.
or valuing your opinion, allowing you to share equally in things within the relationship. For example, if you want to pay for, lunch today, allowing you to do that, um, allowing you to be yourself, to dress the way you want to be, to have your own thoughts,
Your
and
own friends.
your own friends, your interests, not wanting to check up on you all the time, being confident with himself. And that's a lot of it too, that they lack confidence in themselves. So that's why they feel the need to control someone else.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think those are critical components to share because, like we said, a lot of times we're not aware of what is healthy.
Yes.
We just know what we grow up with, and some of us grew up in not so healthy relationships.
Hmm.
And so we grow up and emulate those relationships,
Hmm.
and the cycle continues.
Yes, it does because we have children who are watching.
That's right. And there was a quote, and I don't remember who says it, but she says, "We repeat what we don't repair."
That's so true. Hmm.
And I think we do that with our relationship patterns.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're talking about parents who might see these signs, or they might be in an unhealthy or an abusive relationship themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And what do you suggest? What steps do you suggest that parents take for their teenagers or even for themselves?
Well, if you have a teenager that you think is in a teen dating violence relationship, listen to them. Be open minded. Just take the time, let them talk. Don't rush to judgments. Just give them that time because a lot of times they think that they'll sound crazy if they say something to you. You won't believe them. So it's really important to just take the time to listen. If you feel that they're not forthcoming with all the information and maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to you, This is a time where you just check your ego at the door, and say, okay, which adults person in my child's life is she most comfortable talking to? Because again, it's about your child. And so it could be an aunt, it could be, a teacher, someone that, a grandparent, someone that, your daughter is really close to and can really talk about things. Allow her, make the introduction, allow her to be able to talk to that person one-on-one so she can get everything out in the open. Because that's the first step, getting it out in the open. Once you say it and you realize what you just said, and that it becomes real.
Yes.
And then from there, someone can take the steps to intervene, which you never want to play God in a situation like that. Don't take it on yourself to go talk to that person and say, how dare you do this?
Because as a mom, that would be my first instinct, right?
Mhm.
Is
Yeah,
to jump in there and intervene and fix it, right?
definitely. But just remember, the most dangerous time for your child, if she's in a relationship like this, is when she's taking the steps to break things off. So you don't want to do things out of order. You don't want to run and confront the other person. You want to do things in a manner that will keep her safe. And so the best thing to do is contact your nearest domestic violence program. They have people and advocates who are trained to do safety planning and go through all the different options with you. It can be confidential over the phone, or you can make an appointment and go in person, whatever you want to do, and you'll hear all the options. Most important of all, though, you'll also get safety planning for your daughter. They'll do an assessment to assess the level of risk that your daughter is in and go from there.
That is so, so critical. So what if your daughter, let's say, okay, what if your daughter is a older adult, again, within, let's say within 25, 20, 25, 30, but it's not just a boyfriend, they have a spouse. What would you say to that parent who suspects that her daughter is getting mistreated?
Again, the same thing, give your daughter that forum to be able to open up and talk to you. A lot of times, if it's in the early stages, she may say, no, nothing's going on. And that's because we know that in domestic violence situations, on average, it takes someone 7 times before they finally leave the abuse. And that's because no one ever gets into a relationship to begin with because it's abusive. They fall in love, things are good in the beginning. And so there's always the hope that things will change and go back to that. And so there are things that they may ask, the abuser may ask for forgiveness and say, I'm sorry, this won't happen again. So you give them a chance. Then the next time something comes along, okay, this is happening again, let's go to counseling.
Yeah.
But oftentimes that doesn't happen, but you still give another chance. Then, you never know what may be going on, but chance after chance, that person tries to make the relationship work. She might think it's her fault because of the verbal and emotional abuse that she's hearing. And so just, really be patient with that person. Be patient, and you can say, well, I'm seeing this and I'm seeing these signs, maybe bring it to her attention a little bit, but don't push, because you don't want to ultimately push her away. You
Right.
know, a victim of domestic violence has to be ready, has to be ready to make that break.
That is so, so key. And I love when you said don't push because you might push her away. You
Mhm.
want to keep that door open so that
Yeah.
you can be a soft place for her to fall or him. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, we did clarify that this happens with male and female. We use the female pronoun because a large population of the people who endure domestic violence are female. Right. And so, okay, having those resources and knowing, I love what you said about don't play God, because again, you might potentially put that person in more danger
Yeah.
than anything else,
Yeah. This
right?
is serious. Yeah.
Yes. And again, just to clarify or to reiterate, when we're talking about domestic violence, we're not just talking about for a romantic relationship. We're talking about either in a parent child relationship, a child parent relationship, or just a friendship. wherever there is power and control being exerted over someone to do things that they don't want to do is potentially violent.
Mhm.
Yes. So if I am a parent who's watching, Vanessa, or I'm someone who's, I think I might be, it's not really physical. Sometimes we argue or we might play rough or, we're horseplay around, and that's just how we do it. I'm not sure it's even an abuse, right? I'm questioning that. What would you say to that person or to that parent?
I would say, are you uncomfortable when this is happening? Is this something that you would like to happen, or is it something that's happening to you and you just go along with it?
That's a good point. That's a good point. And if you're not sure, set a boundary, right? Set a boundary. And the boundary could be, I don't like when we play like this or something like that. And if somebody continues to violate that boundary, that's not safe.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yes, yes. So, um, can you give us an idea of, I know we are in Georgia, but most states have their own domestic abuse resource and hotlines and things like that. But if somebody, let's say for example, is in Georgia and needs some help, what are some of the, or how can they reach out to the Promise Place?
Well, we do have a 24-hour crisis hotline. Again, it's confidential. You don't even have to give your name if you don't feel comfortable as yet. If you do give your name, you don't have to worry about anyone outside of our agency knowing that you called. All of our records are even protected. And so our crisis line number is 770-460-1604. And that's a number you can call at 3 in the morning, at 2 in the afternoon, anytime, day or night. Someone will always pick up the phone. It never goes to voicemail.
Excellent. Can you give me that number again? I'm going to drop it in the link as soon as we finish our broadcast.
Oh, sure. It is 770
Mhm.
460 1604.
1604, and that's a 24-hour hotline.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, in Georgia, you can also contact your state coalition. Every state has a coalition against domestic violence. So in Georgia, it's the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and you can look on their website, and they will give you a list of agencies according to what part of Georgia you're in, and will tell you what program is closest to you.
Awesome.
If you call our number as well, we'll also get you in touch with where you need to be if you're not in our service area.
Excellent. Excellent. Those are excellent resources. And again, if you're just joining us or if you're catching us on the replay, please share this out. This is really good information that could save somebody's life. We're talking about teen domestic violence awareness with Miss Vanessa Wilkins, who's the executive director of Promise Place in Georgia. And she has given us a wealth of resources here, things to look for and things, action steps that we can take to keep that person, that victim or survivor safe. And we want to spread the word and make sure that as many people as possible get this information. And just like the abuser doesn't necessarily wear a mask and look differently from anybody else, neither does the victims, right?
That's right.
Somebody next to you, sitting next to you in church, could be victimized, or in your class could be victimized. So do not discriminate in how you share this information, right?
That's right.
So, Vanessa, as we wrap up and bring this broadcast to an end, what are 2 to 3 things that you believe people should really know about teen domestic violence awareness?
Teen domestic violence is real. It's happening in our communities. It's happening to our teens. And the primary goal of any type of intervention with teens that are going through this is safety. So that's something that always needs to be in the forefront, and keeping that person safe. And, there's our program that you can contact for more resources. You can also go to our website, which is promiseplace.org, and get some more information. You can also join our fight against domestic violence and become a volunteer, going into the classrooms and talking to the teens.
That is so powerful, and thank you for that. And for those of you who follow me on social media, you might also know that I teach a class, a 6-week class on not necessarily domestic violence. It includes domestic violence, but on healthy relationships. So if this is something you might want for your congregation, for your workers, your employees, or for your youth group or whomever. This is a curriculum that I take high powered executives through, because they too endure domestic violence and have challenges in defining what healthy relationships are and how to create them. So this is also a program that I've developed, and I've taught it in shelters across Georgia through the Alma G. Davis Foundation. So if you are also familiar with a shelter who would like this, reach out to us, because this is a resource that we have. And our biggest desire is to change legacies, right? We want to teach people how to be healthy, how to be safe, and knowledge is power. All right, so I'm going to check in here. We have a comment from Dr. Dana Brunton. Is there a hotline one can call to report? Dr. Dana, thank you for asking that question, and we will reiterate what Miss Vanessa says, is that each state has its own coalition against domestic violence. And so I know that you are in Minnesota, so it probably would be listed as Minnesota Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Am I correct, Vanessa?
Yes, that would be the coalition. We don't have a number per se to report abuse, but you could definitely call the hotline yourself, and an advocate will be on the other end of the phone, and you can discuss what you see is happening, and we can give you tips on what you can do. As I mentioned, unless a survivor is ready to leave their situation and they have to do so safely, we have to keep that at the forefront when we're trying to intervene in these situations. So it
Right.
just depends on what exactly is going on right then. If it's
Yeah.
something endangering a child or an elderly person, of course, as mandated reporters, we would contact DFACS. Um, and so it just depends on exactly what type of situation you are calling about.
That's so true. That's so true. And I have quite a few parishioners and pastors, clergy, who watch the broadcast, and I think the same thing goes for them to understand also that the time of leaving or separating from the abuser creates the highest risk, right? And so could you just reiterate that for us, so that those who are watching or just joining can also have the information to say, we have to be careful.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you watch the news, and I know a lot of you do, if you hear of a domestic violence situation in which there was a homicide, you will always hear the words X or estranged. And that tells you right there that that person took the steps to leave, and that's when things became violent, resulting in something fatal to them. So we can't stress it enough that the most dangerous time for any survivor of domestic violence is when they take the steps to leave. I was even talking to someone the other day, one of our clients, and one of our former clients, I should say, and she was even mentioning, right, he picked up on when I changed because I started going to get counseling. And so he realized that he wasn't able to push the same buttons. I wasn't reacting the same way. So
Mhm.
he realized that, wait a minute, I might be taking steps to leave. Something's changing. He doesn't have the same power and control over me. And so he stabbed her multiple times.
Mhm.
And so it's not just a process like the physical step of leaving, but even the mental
That
process of separating from your abuser. There are a lot of things to take into consideration to be safe.
Yes, yes, that is so true. That is so true. And as soon as I get a client who says, I think I'm in a domestic abuse situation, one of the first things that we do is a safety plan.
Yeah.
That is so critical, so critical. And so I think that this broadcast has been really inspirational, and I think that we've provided lots of information to empower people who might be in a domestic abuse situation, teens and young adults alike, or adults who might be in a domestic violence situation. And I just want to encourage you all to get some help, seek support, go about it. There are steps, people who are trained to help you to get out of that situation, right?
And these services are free of charge.
And free of charge. Services free of charge. That's amazing, right? So, Vanessa, would you give people your contact information, how they can reach you again, and any closing remarks you might have?
Okay, yes. Again, our crisis number is 770-460-1604. You can go to our website if you'd like to contact me directly. My email address is vanessa.wilkins@promiseplace.org. We are here to help. We have other certified domestic violence programs in the state of Georgia, and our mission is just to prevent domestic violence from happening in our communities. It's an epidemic, that's happening right here. And you can either come alongside with us as we take steps to end this epidemic, or if you need help yourself, our doors are wide open for you. You can contact us anytime.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I think this is, again, a great broadcast, lots of resources, lots of good information. And I think we can't do something like this often enough because, as you pointed out, that it takes like seven steps or seven times of that cycle. It takes multiple times to hear it, to even develop the courage to want to get out and want to get help. So thank
And
you.
women who are in domestic violence, they already have the courage. They are strong, brave women because they already know how to keep themselves safe in that situation.
That's so
In
true.
the situation that they're in, they fight every day to remain safe.
That is so true. That is
Mhm.
so true. And we just, send our prayers and our thoughts to anyone who's find themselves in that situation, and let you know that there is hope and
Yes.
there is help out there for you.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you again. Again, my name is Ann Dillard, and I'm licensed marriage and family therapist. And I am so excited that you've chosen to join this episode of Teen Talk Live. And I'll be dropping the resources in the comments section, and you can join us here live on Facebook on Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. Please like and share this video because we want to get the word out. Have a good night. Bye bye.